Welcome back to another episode of the Jacksonville Buzz's Buzz on Veterans. I have the phenomenal honor of Colonel Squared. I have Colonel Chris Budihas to my left. To my right, I got Colonel Tony Lugo. Tony's here to talk about your transition out of a 30-year career?
Close. Very close. 28.
28.
Yeah,
okay. Well, you know, in the private sector, we just round that up.
Yeah,
so
I round it down.
So Picogrid, right?
Yeah.
We did talk on another segment.
Absolutely.
Is a company that's integrating the use of technology and sensors to the modern-day warfighter, increasing efficiency, hopefully decreasing casualties.
Absolutely.
Those are both important.
Yeah, absolutely.
But in this segment, we're here to talk a little bit about your journey coming out of 30 years-ish in the military into the private sector and what that experience was.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm looking forward to talking about it.
So, Chris, I think, you know, being a guy that's going through that now.
So tell me, Tony, how easy was it?
It definitely wasn't easy.
Okay.
I mean, I learned a lot. I think what I learned the most, or what was most important, was communication. Yeah. Just networking and having 30-minute discussions with fellow veterans and learning about their experiences. Everything from, you know, the transition piece, you know, going through the VA process, you know, looking for a job, trying to figure all that out. Just hearing their stories was probably the most important thing that occurred during my transition period. And, and I did take about a year to do that. So, I mean, I had it scheduled out on a whiteboard. I started having those conversations early, but that was a key piece, just the other veterans within the network and just, you know, even guys I didn't know and gals, talking to them and just sharing their stories and hearing them was probably the most important thing.
It's funny because, you know, when you went to the Citadel, probably 1,000-ish cadets showing up one time, but when you leave as an indivital in most cases.
You do.
So how do you kind of build that? You got to kind of build that cohort as you're going along, right?
Yeah. You know, what I'd find is that, you know, LinkedIn obviously helps you with your network. But the other thing I found is that, you know, even amongst veterans and even those who only served like 5 years, there's that bond. Yeah. And so even if you haven't talked to somebody in like 10 years, even if you reach out to them, they'll more than likely drop everything they're doing and just have a conversation with you. And so, you know, the same goes to me today is that I get emails or phone calls from guys I don't even know who only served maybe 4 or 5 years in the Army. I'm like, absolutely, I will take the time to talk to you, to share my story and see if I can get you on the same path that I got on.
Right. It's funny when you talk network. So LinkedIn, extremely powerful. You know, I've said this to a few people, like when LinkedIn came in, I liked it. I think Facebook was pretty good, though my kids tell that. One of the reasons they have Facebook is you're on there.
It's for the old guys.
It's for the old guys. But the reality of it is, like, you got to put yourself out there. And folks that aren't willing to do that, I think they pay a price because they lose knowledge. And I like what you said about reaching out to folks, too. Because many cases, I've told a few people, you know, I talk to my peers like you and others, but I've also talked to people younger than me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, to be honest, like some of my potential people I'll work with are much younger than me and getting their perspective. That captain who did 5-6 years and getting a perspective who's been out in the workforce for a while and going, yeah, here's the things you might want to consider that my peers may not know or thought about because we're older. You know?
So as you were transitioning out, you know, a lot of things people don't think about, and growing up in an Army family, I'm very sensitive to these type of things, but, you know, things that people don't really even register on the day in and day out basis that can cause stress. Like, I tease this guy all the time that eventually he's going to have to pick out his own socks, right? You know, you no longer are you in. You can have any suit you want so long as it's green. So how has that transition out of basically, I mean, regimenting, know what you had to do or else, right? Now, being the leader, you were the or else. But how have you seen that experience been for you as you've come into the private sector? You know, the things that you don't even think about, like, oh, I actually do have to go pick out clothes that are not a BDU, you know, that type of thing. Like, how has that experience been?
Yeah, that was probably pretty tough. I mean, that is, you know, to your point, you know, every day for the last 28 plus years, I know what I need to wear, where I need to be, what I need to do. There's a schedule, you know. As I got older, I had someone helping me with my schedule, that type of thing, or I was helping someone with their schedule. So the point about clothes, absolutely. You know, that's going to, you know, like Joseph A. Bank and say, hey, just help me get current on my wardrobe, you know, because the belt I have from 1995, probably not in style anymore, right? But I think, you know, the toughest part of the transition for me was just the schedule, because, you know, we were dictated, okay, you're going to do PT at 6:30 in the morning, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. I'm now remote, working from home.
Yeah.
You know, I have to determine that schedule myself. You have to have the discipline to be able to work out, to you know, set meetings, have lunch, and do all these things. And you can get easily distracted sometimes working from home, or maybe you're traveling where you don't have that schedule, that routine.
Yeah.
So how do you cope? That's really
and
what I
6:30
talk
PT
about.
a.m. or 06:30 or
06:30.
dark 30.
dark 30, yeah.
So for those that know that,
Yeah.
it wasn't really 6:30. It was 6:25, right? And if you were there, you know, if you were there at 6:30, you were
Yeah.
late. And then in the private sector, sometimes it can be a 6:30-ish.
Yeah,
And you know those
Yeah.
type of things.
Yeah.
You know, I have lived in the world by which if you are not 5 minutes early, you're late.
Right.
But that's
absolutely,
also a
yeah.
good skill set for the private sector
Yeah.
because they know if you were able to lead men and women on the battlefield,
Yeah.
you know, in wartime and peace, you know your schedule. Those are things that are actually transferable skill sets. So
Absolutely.
through your experience over the last year and a half, have you seen the pathway by which that military service skill set, 6:25 a.m. PT example,
Yeah.
transitioned into that private sector?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think, you know, with hiring any veteran, right, you know, you're going to get someone who's reliable. They're going to show up. They're going to do what they're asked to do. They're going to take the job seriously. And I think those are the intangibles that you want in an employee. So, you know, for Picogrid, we're hiring right now. You know, we're looking at, hey, who are the veterans that are out there that we can bring onto the team? Because you know that, you know, they're going to show up. They're going to work hard for you. They're going to do those great things for you. You know, as far as, you know, 6:25 PT, absolutely. I mean, that's something I learned really quickly. What I learned was when I showed up for a virtual meeting at 6:25 and it started at 6:30, I was probably the only one in there for 5 minutes because everything really does. Everything does start either on time or a couple minutes late. But you know, I got used to that relatively quickly. So I only show up like 3 minutes early now instead of 5. But yeah.
Or what you do is you schedule the meeting 15 minutes before the real time, and then when everybody runs late, you actually start on time.
That's true too.
It actually is a trick. So
Yeah. All right, I'll use that one.
That's a free one for
All
you.
right, I appreciate it.
So I guess as we're taking it out, Chris, anything that you'd like to kind of share while we have Tony here talking about transition that you would see as you're in that phase of your career?
No, I think you got to put yourself out there. You got to use all the resources that are out there. LinkedIn is one we already talked about.
Yeah.
I personally have used American Corporate Partners, the Commit Foundation, Hiring Our Heroes, your Skill Bridge. There's 4Block. I use 4Block myself.
Absolutely, yeah.
So there's a lot of resources out there. But you know, in uniform, we talk about having courage. I mentioned this before. You got to have physical and moral courage. Still translate out, in the workforce because here's the reality. When you leave the service, nobody's telling you, like you said, what socks you're going to wear. So nobody's telling you. So you have to self-moderate, and you have to take the initiative to go be part of these organizations to ask for that help. And what I found is I've done information interviews too. People I never met, except on LinkedIn, just direct messages, hey, can I get on the phone with you? Nobody said no yet.
Right.
You know, and that's remarkable. These are people, they're non-veterans, and that's gigantic. And then I've told a couple folks, and it goes back to that 73% of American veterans leaving uniform will leave their first job within 3 years. That's why you got to do these informational interviews, so you can find out if they're a good fit for you. They may hire you because they might say, hey, you got the qualifications, you seem like you'll be a good fit here, but are they really?
Well, and that swing and a miss can be actually detrimental because, you know, if you think about that guy or girl coming out of the military and that first job, to your point, that is in many ways a test of their viability post-military.
Yeah.
And if they flame out terribly because it wasn't a good fit, it wasn't necessarily their fault. It just wasn't a good fit. But coming out of the military, there is a prescribed course of action down to how to make your bed. Right? And I have only understood one way to make your bed. That's just the way I thought it was supposed to be. Apparently, there's a negotiable level of what making a bed is and shining your shoes. But there is a regiment that is like, you will do these 10 things and you will be successful. They take that military experience and then they flame out in that first job in the private sector. That can send them into a hole of, gosh, I should have never left because I have no value outside the military.
Well,
so that's a very important point.
And then my second point is, so when I got the Marines, I really didn't know what I wanted to do, so I interviewed with a lot of different companies in different market segments, and I ended up working for General Electric, a very large company, obviously.
A little bit.
And so instead of saying, you know, as I retire, what do I want to do? I started off with what I don't want to do. I listed everything I didn't want to do, and then I went to what I wanted to do. Then I reflected on why I didn't want to do these things, and that was very important to me because I think that will buy down that mismatch between getting hired for the wrong organization for all the wrong reasons. And salary's important, but it can't be the only guiding light to why you take a job with an organization.
Absolutely.
Because that's it. You probably will not. You'll flame out eventually.
Yeah, and you don't want to do that. I mean, nobody wants to flame out, but especially if you're that first at bat after getting out of the military, and you're like, you know what, my job is going to be X, and it just becomes an epic disaster that can really, really impact what their future career possibilities are. So I know we could talk forever about this stuff, but in all sincerity, both of you gentlemen, thank you so much for your leadership within the United States military, Army and Marines. Without what you guys have done in your careers, we can't do this. So in all sincerity, I thank you guys. Growing up in the military, a little special something about the changing your socks thing. That's real.
That's real.
That's real.
It's a real struggle.
So guys, thanks so much for joining us today on the Jacksonville Buzz. If you like us, share us. Remember, live with gratitude.
Operation Barnabas is a veterans ministry, started in 2017 with the purpose of helping our veterans that kind of got left behind, and they've struggled with addictions, PTSD, suicidal thoughts, those kind of things, helping them get whole again through one-to-one mentorship.
Being able to communicate with them and help them can drastically change their life, can drastically change a family's life. The little that we can do is put our hand out and say, hey, do you want a hand up?